Oops, I'm a Genius. Book 5 of the Intergalactic Pest Control Series by A.H. Mayweather. Pastor Dean left his 7th message at 8:14 on Tuesday morning, just as Jerome was loading a stepladder into the truck. "Jerome, I have attempted patience," Dean said through the speaker on Jerome's cracked phone. "I have also attempted prayer. Neither has made the object I saw behind your home less unusual. Please call me." Monday had been devoted to returning the truck's rear suspension from philosophical to legally arguable. A salvaged leaf spring from Calvin Rusk now held the damaged side level, provided Jerome avoided potholes, hard turns, and anyone qualified to inspect it. Jerome wedged the ladder beneath a cage and shut the tailgate. "Man's fixin' to wear a groove in voicemail." Kevin stood well back from the shed doorway in gray coveralls. A silver support ran beneath the coveralls from his left hip to his ankle, a brace still supporting one antenna. The inspector required a documented non-coercive response to the civilian exposure. "I ain't coerced him once." "You have not responded." "That is the least coercive thing a person can do." The morning's job involved yellow jackets beneath a trailer 3 lots over. Jerome treated the nest behind the skirting and removed something the size of a cantaloupe. After Jerome stepped on a decorative windmill, Mr. Haney cut the agreed $60 to $40, the fastest he had ever settled on a number while owing Jerome, and withheld the difference until Jerome found a replacement. The feed store across town had not stocked that model since Clinton. By noon, Jerome was driving home with one stung wrist, $40, and the broken blade rattling on the passenger floor. He went straight to the cooler beneath his workbench. The cooler was open. The towel covering the jars had been folded back, and the 3 remaining jars of batch 37 were gone. "Kevin?" Kevin appeared from the shadowed rear of the shed, but stayed clear of the open doorway. "Your vocal pattern suggests an accusation." "Somebody stole my liquor." Jerome held up the empty towel. "You were here." "A terrestrial human approached the property at 10:36. I withdrew to the vessel." "You left him alone with batch 37? "I was injured, undisguised, and faced with an unknown civilian entering a chemically unstable structure. Protecting your recreational poison was not the highest available safety priority." Kevin had slipped through the gap behind the shed, crossed the woods, and entered the cloaked Hias-Kalar from the far side. From there he had seen a hooded figure enter the shed and leave carrying something. The ship could confirm an adult human of indeterminate sex and poor posture, but it could not identify a covered face it had never recorded. Jerome considered the evidence. "Randy." "The vessel cannot support that conclusion. Poor posture supports it plenty." He called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher answered on the 4th ring, and Jerome recognized the voice before she finished saying, "Pine County." "Lena?" There was a pause. "Jerome." "I need to report a theft." "Of what?" "Personal property." "What kind of personal property?" Jerome looked at Kevin. Kevin folded both arms. 3 jars of a privately manufactured grain-based cleaning solution. "Moonshine?" Lena asked. "Its possible recreational applications are not central to the crime. You want me to send a deputy to investigate somebody stealing liquor you made illegally?" "When you say it that way, you remove important context. Is this connected to Pastor Dean's aircraft question?" Jerome straightened. "He called the sheriff. He asked whether we had received reports of unusual aircraft. I told him the only report came from you, drunk, several weeks ago. That was accurate reporting under difficult circumstances. Goodbye, Jerome." She disconnected. From the shadowed corner of the shed came a slow, wet bubble. Jerome turned toward the covered fermenter. Batch 38 had stopped working sometime during the morning and settled clear enough to run. He put the phone away. "Well, Lord willing, Randy ain't stole the recipe." The first clear stream from batch 38 smelled respectable. Jerome collected a spoonful beneath the condenser, let it cool, and touched it to his tongue. His face tightened. Kevin watched from a chair positioned beyond kicking distance. The result is unsuccessful? Tastes like corn got divorced. Jerome swallowed with difficulty. Kept the bitterness and lost the house. Kevin accepted a second spoonful. His mandibles opened, closed, and remained still for several seconds. I possess a fermentation catalyst aboard the ship. He returned from the Hescalar with a paper packet of dried blue-brown veil root used in fermented ctheric nectar to bind harsh waste compounds. Kevin crushed half between his palms and added it to the thumper keg while Jerome adjusted the heat. 20 minutes later, the new stream ran clear and smelled faintly of toasted sugar. Jerome tasted it, blinked, and took a larger swallow. The liquor went down as smoothly as well water and reached his knees with the force of a dropped toolbox. That, he said, holding up the glass, is agricultural progress. They collected the ordinary run in clean jars. The final usable portion went into a brown stoneware jug large enough to hold a gallon, although the liquid reached only a little above the quarter mark. Kevin left the remaining veil root beside the still while he went to check the support on his leg. Jerome regarded the packet. Half a handful had improved several jars. Applying the other half to one jug seemed less like theft than concentration. He tipped it in, replaced the stopper, and rolled the jug gently beneath his boot. After 5 minutes, he poured 2 fingers into a chipped coffee cup. The concentrated liquor had no burn at all. Warmth spread through his chest, followed by the familiar looseness behind his eyes, but nothing else announced itself. Jerome decided alien agriculture had simply produced excellent moonshine and began cleaning the still. The pressure regulator had clicked irregularly all morning. Without thinking, he removed it, filed a burr from the valve stem, cut a gasket from an old sprayer diaphragm, and reseated the spring 2 turns lighter. The clicking stopped. On the radio, a man asked which American president had been the first born in a hospital. "Jimmy Carter," Jerome said. He found a receipt for truck brake pads beneath a stack of bait labels, remembered that the warranty expired in 11 days, and calculated the yield of batch 38 without using paper. The answer sat beside the remaining fabrication credit and the number of screws missing from the western roof brace. Kevin returned and stopped in the doorway. "You repaired the regulator." "Wasn't difficult. You have unsuccessfully repaired it 6 times. 5. The 3rd time was preventive damage." Kevin's antennae lifted. "Explain the vessel's landing compensation network." Jerome opened his mouth to tell him not to start. Instead, he described how the system measured pressure, predicted load, and redistributed apparent weight. He connected its delay in living tissue to a documentary about suspension bridges he had watched in 2003. He remembered the presenter's yellow tie and an advertisement's toll-free number, which had occupied his brain for 20 years without doing a lick of work. He remembered the motel room and rain ticking against its broken air conditioner. When he thought of batch 37, 37 sets of temperatures, measurements, mistakes, and weather conditions arranged themselves in order. Jerome lowered the coffee cup. "Kevin," he said carefully, "I believe this liquor has made me considerably smarter." Kevin's attention moved from the coffee cup to the paper packet beside the still. He picked it up and turned it over. Nothing fell out. "Where is the remaining veil root?" Jerome nodded toward the stoneware jug. "Concentrated." "You used all of it?" "Wasn't enough left to save." Kevin's antennae drew close together. "That belonged to the vessel's nutritional stores. You put it in my liquor. I authorized half." Kevin placed the empty packet flat on the workbench with care that made the gesture more accusing than throwing it. "Access to an object does not transfer ownership." Jerome could think of 6 legal distinctions between abandoned material and material left unattended. He could also remember Kevin saying half, the exact pressure of the packet passing between Kevin's fingers, and his own decision to wait until Kevin left. "I can replace it," he said. "From which planet?" That reduced the useful distinctions to none. Kevin insisted upon testing the liquor aboard the Hescalar, where the medical system could observe his blood chemistry and Jerome could be kept from improving the experiment with guesswork. Kevin measured 1 spoonful into a metal cup and swallowed. "Inventory number on the cracked containment panel," Jerome said. C-14-6. "Name of the moon where your old supervisor left 3 technicians behind." Kevin's good antenna tilted. "That is not a technical question." "Still got the right answer, Speed." The ship projected 2 chemical paths above Kevin's medical support. In the first, etheric digestive enzymes destroyed the Vel compound before it reached the brain. In the second, a human liver converted the unheated compound, in the presence of alcohol, into an active neurological stimulant. "So his stomach kills the smart part," Jerome said. "Imprecise but correct," Kevin replied. "So all of batch 38 tastes good," Jerome said, "but only the jug went to college." "Current evidence supports 1 enhanced human," Kevin said. "It also supports unauthorized use of vessel inventory." By sunset, the enhancement began to fade. Numbers that had arrived complete became figures Jerome needed to write down. The landing network returned to being purple machinery Kevin understood. Jerome kept the conclusions but lost the easy route to them. On Wednesday morning, he woke without a headache and spent 10 minutes trying unsuccessfully to calculate the volume of his coffee cup. Doris Calhoun from Lot 8 knocked shortly after 9. Kevin slipped behind the hanging tarp that separated Jerome's kitchen from the narrow hall while she entered carrying an electric bill and an expression of personal betrayal. "They say I used $412 of power," she said. "I own a refrigerator, 6 lamps, and a television I turn off whenever politicians appear. You know anything about meters?" Ordinarily, Jerome knew they spun and cost money. He set the bill down, went to the shed, and poured a measured swallow from the jug. He waited until the familiar warmth spread behind his eyes. When he returned, the meter number on the bill unlocked a memory from 3 summers earlier. He had crawled beneath Doris's trailer after a possum died beside the service pedestal. Her meter ended in 7314. The bill listed 7341, assigned to Lot 14, where Mr. Haney ran a freezer, 2 window units, and a workshop welder. Jerome calculated 6 months of incorrect charges, wrote the relevant figures in order, and gave Doris the exact sentence that would prevent the utility company from transferring her through 4 departments. She studied him. "Since when did you get educated?" "Tuesday afternoon." Doris placed $20 on the table. "I'm bringing my sister." The first call arrived fast. Elaine's insurer had denied storm damage to her roof. The second caller owned a riding mower that started only when threatened. Kevin rejected a third caller's pressure cooker dispute as outside the company's demonstrated competencies. Kevin routed the shed telephone through the Hescalar and answered from behind the cloak. His translated voice sounded formal enough that callers assumed Jerome had hired office staff. By 1 o'clock, he had scheduled 4 appointments, established a $20 minimum, and refused to let anyone arrive without describing the problem first. Jerome found a piece of plywood beneath the damaged workbench and painted a sign in black pesticide marker. Pritchard Practical Solutions, $20, cash. 1 problem per chair. He propped the sign against a folding table outside the trailer and placed 2 chairs beside it. A pitcher of water sat on the table because Kevin had made hydration a condition of continued cognitive testing. A man from Lot 6 held a carburetor in his lap while asking about a tax notice. Kevin ruled that 1 chair did not make them 1 problem. The man chose the carburetor. Elaine Calhoun arrived with 3 folders and the conviction that insurance companies trained employees inside locked cellars. Enhanced Jerome found a photograph in her own paperwork proving that the insurer had blamed storm damage on the wrong section of roof. He dictated an appeal in language Elaine described as suspiciously grammatical. She paid $20 and promised him a share of anything she recovered. Kevin spoke through the radio on the windowsill. Contingent compensation has not been evaluated for terrestrial tax consequences. Elaine leaned toward the radio. Your secretary sounds foreign. Danish, Jerome said. I am not, Kevin replied. Taxes run high over there. They hear extra income and start looking for a form. Calvin Rusk from Lot 17 brought the riding mower on a utility trailer despite the chair limitation. Jerome listened to the starter, smelled the exhaust, and remembered a diagram from an old repair manual. The safety switch beneath the seat was intact. Its mounting bracket flexed when Calvin sat down and broke contact whenever his weight shifted. Jerome corrected it with 2 washers and charged $20. Calvin paid $30 because 3 mechanics had already replaced the starter. Calvin's mower trailer had barely cleared Lot 12 when Pastor Dean occupied the customer chair and placed $20 beneath a church offering envelope. Across the front, in block letters, he had written, Large black spacecraft behind Jerome's shed. Office is closed, Jerome said. Dean tapped the envelope. 1 problem, 1 chair, cash. Jerome glanced toward the woods. The Haskalar remained cloaked, and the radio on the windowsill was conspicuously silent. What you observed was an experimental agricultural vehicle undergoing field evaluation. The radio clicked. Kevin said, The Haskalar is not designed for agriculture. Dean turned toward the radio. We discussed supporting the cover explanation, Jerome exclaimed. I rejected 3 explanations as technically indefensible. You continued rehearsing them. Jerome stared at the radio. Foreign consultant. Dean picked up the offering envelope and folded it once. Jerome, I know what I saw. Scripture contains stranger sights than a vessel in the woods. Ezekiel himself was carried into heaven in a chariot of fire surrounded by wheels within wheels. Elijah, Jerome said. Dean paused. 2 Kings chapter 2. Elijah went up by a whirlwind after the chariot, and horses of fire separated him from Elisha. Ezekiel saw the living creatures and the wheel within a wheel in chapter 1, but he did not climb aboard. You have combined 2 separate incidents involving airborne religious transportation. The words had arrived complete. Jerome remembered the King James Bible his grandmother kept on the kitchen table and the molasses stain over half of 2 Kings. She had made him read 2 chapters whenever he was caught lying and 4 whenever the lie involved fireworks. Dean stared at him. When did you learn Scripture? Against my will, mostly. Dean closed his eyes briefly. Jerome lifted his face toward the cloudless sky. Lord, I appreciate improved recall as much as the next sinner, but a small amount of guidance concerning useful application would be welcome. Tell him, Kevin said through the radio. I was speaking to God. The recommendation remains applicable. It is a spacecraft, Jerome said. It belongs to a species called the Ctheric, except ownership is currently under review. I am its acting captain through circumstances involving abduction, pest control equipment, and management failure. Dean's eyes moved toward the woods. And the foreign consultant? Jerome checked the gravel lane and the neighboring porches. Nobody was watching. He pressed the communicator twice. Branches shifted beside the shed. Kevin stepped into view in gray coveralls and the second silver translation collar, now calibrated to English. He stopped several yards away and raised one hand. I am Kevin. I am a Ctheric systems technician, apprentice pest control operator, and contracted employee. I am not Danish or demonic. I did not say demonic, Dean replied. Jerome predicted the concern. Dean gripped his Bible with both hands. Kevin shifted his weight carefully. Dean pushed the empty folding chair toward him. Are you hurt? Kevin approached cautiously and sat. Recovery remains satisfactory. Dean pointed at the silver ring beneath Kevin's mandibles. "How am I understanding you?" "The collar renders your speech privately to me and projects mine outward in English. Only one participant requires a collar for two-way exchange. Without it, you would hear only etheric clicks." Jerome touched his own ring. "Mine puts the clicking in my head and turns my talking into culturally appropriate threats." "Many threats require little adjustment," Kevin said. The ship spoke through the radio. "Civilian exposure response documented. No threats, detention, chemical alteration, or abduction detected." Jerome picked up Dean's $20. "Does that mean we passed?" "Documentation complete. Evaluation pending." Dean looked toward Kevin. "What happens now?" "A safety hearing will occur Saturday at 9, Kevin said. "As the exposed civilian, your attendance is requested." "Then I'll be here." Dean closed his Bible. "I will withdraw my question and say nothing else until Saturday." By Thursday morning, 6 residents waited outside Lot 12. One carried a tax notice. Another refused to describe his problem in front of witnesses. Nia Harper from Lot 13 advanced with 4 water bills clipped together. "My meter moves when everything is off. I checked every faucet twice." "Toilets?" Jerome asked. "Close the valves behind both." "Anybody secretly filling the swimming pool?" Nia looked toward her single wide. "Jerome, my bathtub touches both walls." He handed the bills back. "Show me the meter." The line followed them to Lot 13, despite Kevin announcing through the radio that observation did not establish a place in the appointment order. Nia's meter sat in a shallow concrete box beside the service road. Jerome lifted the lid with a screwdriver. The red leak indicator spun steadily beneath the glass. He asked Nia to close the trailer's interior shutoff. She did, calling through an open window when the valve stopped. The red triangle continued turning. "Leak is between here and there," Jerome said. "That narrows it down to dirt." "Most plumbing investigations do." Jerome knelt beside the box. Mud clung to his work pants, although it had not rained since Sunday. He looked toward the ditch behind the east row. The ditch held a thin ribbon of water and enough mosquito larvae to make it vibrate. He remembered soft ground near the service road on Tuesday. Nia's line branched from the east row main and ran toward her trailer through the wettest ground. Jerome walked the route slowly. He pressed the screwdriver into the soil every few feet. Near Nia's rear skirting, it sank to the handle without resistance. When he pulled it free, brown water filled the hole. "How long has the bedroom floor been damp?" he asked. "Since last month. The manager said old trailers sweat." "Not enough to raise a water bill 41%. Jerome marked the wet ground on the back of the oldest bill. "The line is leaking here, or close enough that I wouldn't park anything heavy over it. Manager needs to shut this section down and dig before the ground washes out." Nia examined the muddy hole. "I told him something was wrong." "Tell him again with numbers. If he argues, tell him the dirt has begun offering a second opinion." When they came back, Kevin interrupted through the radio before Jerome could call the next customer. "Your current intake has reached 6 ounces since yesterday afternoon. Consultations are suspended for food, water, and sleep." The waiting residents complained. A man at the back held up $5. "Can he do mine before he eats?" "Make it 10, Jerome said. Kevin disconnected the telephone. Jerome counted $170 in cash, then glanced at the line, the jug inside the shed, and the empty second chair that could have held another paying problem. "Office management," he told the crowd. "Very proud people." 2 customers remained when a blue sedan turned into Shady Acres. Both headed for their vehicles at the side of the county seal. Lena's early shift had ended 20 minutes earlier. Jerome recognized the driver before the car passed Lot 6. Lena Mercer parked beside the truck. She wore her dispatch uniform and carried a folded sheet of complaints. Silver had appeared near her temples since Jerome last saw her outside the sheriff's office. She still walked like the county had better move. "You blocked the entrance twice," she said. "Someone left their trailer in the fire lane, and somebody called dispatch because a foreign man was issuing orders through a radio." Kevin's voice came from the windowsill. The parking instructions were explicit. Lena stopped. "Is that the Danish secretary?" "He rejects the nationality," Jerome said. "Consistently," Kevin added. Jerome showed her the numbered appointment list, his proposed parking arrangement, and the relevant access widths from a county fire pamphlet. Lena examined the diagram, then examined him. "Doris said you got smart." "Doris has simplified a complicated neurological event. You used to think neurological was a kind of back pain. I was confusing it with neuralgia. I heard both words during a shingles commercial in 2007 and retained them without sufficient context." Lena lowered the complaint sheet. "What happened to you?" "Still evaluating." She sat in the customer chair. Jerome remembered the last time she had done that instead of leaving. "Pastor Dean called this morning," she said. "He said he no longer needed help identifying the aircraft." "You actually spoke to him?" "We reached an understanding, non-coercively." Lena studied his face. "You handled it before it became an emergency. I understand why you find it unfamiliar. Last time you promised me anything, you tied a raccoon trap to your bumper." The whole night came back, mud and all. Lena stood beside the drainage ditch in borrowed rubber boots, while Jerome hooked the trap chain to the bumper. "That bank is too steep," she had told him. "Truck's got four-wheel drive." "Jerome, 3 of them are touching the ground." He had pulled anyway. The truck slid nose first into the ditch. The trap rolled beneath the rear axle, and the raccoon screamed until porch lights came on across half the county. When Lena called her cousin, the county sheriff, to drag them out, Jerome accused her of embarrassing him. He remembered her standing in the mud with the telephone still in her hand, too tired to argue. 3 weeks later, she had tried once more. "Everything has to become an emergency before you treat it like it matters," she said. Jerome told her she wanted somebody with money. Lena shook her head and said, "I wanted you to care before the truck was in the ditch." Then she left him on the porch. Jerome spent the next several years telling his version of the story. "You didn't leave because you thought I was stupid," he said. Her fingers stopped folding the complaint sheet. Jerome rested both hands on his knees. "I told people you wanted somebody with money, because that was easier than admitting you had described me accurately." For several seconds, Lena said nothing. Then she placed the complaints on the empty chair instead of taking them with her. "I waited years to hear you understand that. I am sorry it took neurological enhancement." She almost smiled. Then she leaned closer, sniffed once, and the smile disappeared. "You're drunk." "My reasoning is substantially improved." Jerome could calculate the alcohol remaining in his bloodstream within a narrow range. None of the possible answers changed the smell on his breath. Lena stood and took her keys from her pocket. "Coffee tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Come as yourself and come sober." She drove away before Jerome could ask which version counted as himself. Jerome arrived at the diner beside the courthouse at 9:52 on Friday morning. He had eaten breakfast, drunk 3 cups of coffee, and left the stoneware jug locked in the shed. The 2 ounces of batch 38 in the rinsed cough syrup bottle beneath his truck seat were, he had decided, an emergency reserve rather than a violation. Lena was already in a booth. Jerome sat opposite her and ordered coffee. For the first 10 minutes, nothing went badly. Lena nodded toward the swollen patch on his wrist. "Yellow Jackets? Mr. Haney's place, nest under the trailer. They get you before or after you broke his windmill?" Jerome lowered his coffee. "That information has traveled farther than the invoice." He called dispatch to ask whether crushing a decorative rooster counted as property damage. I stepped on one blade while retreating under hostile air conditions. Rooster was already suffering from weak construction and poor leadership. The corner of Lena's mouth moved. Did you tell him that? Used fewer syllables. She laughed. Jerome hid his smile in his coffee. He asked about dispatch. Lena told him the county had installed a new digital radio system during the winter. Every patrol unit now came through louder, with a half-second delay that caused deputies to repeat themselves whenever nobody answered immediately. "So you hear them clearer?" Jerome asked. "I hear every word twice. Deputy Walsh spent 7 minutes reporting a cow in the highway because he kept interrupting his own echo. Technology has finally allowed him to argue with somebody at his level." Lena laughed again. This one lasted long enough that the waitress looked over from the counter. Jerome smiled and began to think sober coffee might contain more useful chemistry than he had credited. Then she set down her spoon. "Did you mean what you said yesterday?" "Which part?" "About why I left." Jerome remembered saying it. He remembered the relief on Lena's face and knew that the understanding had been real, but the pieces no longer stood together in his mind. "I meant it at the time." Lena's fingers returned to the spoon. "That came out wrong," he said. "It came out familiar." "I still mean it," Jerome said. "I just can't get hold of it the same way." "Get hold of what?" "The whole reason. Yesterday it was laid out in front of me, like parts on a clean tarp. Today it's more like the wrench rolled under the trailer. I know it's there. I can see one end, but I can't get my hand around it." Lena watched him. "Did the liquor make you understand why I left?" "No. You made me understand it when you said it." "Then why couldn't you say so until yesterday?" Jerome opened his mouth. Pride, anger, and the story he had told himself all arrived together. "My thoughts ain't always stored by subject," he said. "Some of the emotional files got mixed in with unpaid bills, old grudges, and pesticide dilution." "Jerome, I know that ain't coming out right. It sounds like a joke." He had intended it to be one. Lena gave him the patient smile people used when they had already begun waiting for the check. She stirred coffee she had not sweetened. "Why did you come this morning?" "You invited me." "That isn't what I asked." "Yesterday I had additional processing capacity." "Yesterday you sounded like you cared." Lena immediately looked as if she wanted to take the sentence back. Jerome told her he needed to check whether he had left the truck window open. He retrieved the cough syrup bottle, swallowed half, and stood beside the truck until the courthouse bricks resolved into measurable courses. Conversations from surrounding tables returned through the diner wall. He remembered Lena's questions in order, including the ones hidden inside them. When he returned, she had placed money beneath her coffee cup. "You were not asking whether I remembered the apology," Jerome said as he sat down. "You were asking whether the man who made it still existed this morning. He does. He simply lacks reliable access to the language he used." Lena did not reach for her keys. "What did you do outside?" she asked. "Restored the temporary effect." "With what?" "A small reserve dose." Lena waited. "The active mechanism is complicated." That sounded like a man closing a door. "I'm trying to answer the question underneath it first." He rested both hands on the table. The enhancement did not manufacture the apology. "Yesterday, when you mentioned the raccoon trap, it let me hold your words, my response, the mud on your boots, and every excuse I built afterward without pushing any part aside." Lena turned the spoon once between her fingers. "What else can you remember?" "Anything I consciously encountered, with varying accuracy." "Our first date. Pine County Fair, August 17th. You bought lemonade because I spent my last cash trying to win you a stuffed bear by throwing rings over bottles. You missed every bottle. The game was geometrically dishonest. You wore a blue shirt and said my red one made me look sunburned. I wore it on the next 3 dates because Irritating you was the only courtship method I understood." Lena smiled despite herself. "You told me it was your only clean shirt." "That was also true. And understanding why I left was in there too." "Yes, say it again." "You left because every problem I ignored had to become an emergency before I cared. When you got mad, I blamed you for being mad. Then I told people you wanted somebody with money because that was easier than admitting I'd run you off." Lena's eyes lowered to the coffee between them. "That is what I was waiting to hear this morning. I knew that. What happens when this wears off again?" "I keep the answer. I just can't always explain how I got there." "Which Jerome is the real one?" "Both. One talks better." She laughed once, then looked back at her coffee. "Do you like being this way?" "It's useful," he said, "and I ain't sure how much of it is mine." Lena leaned forward. "Then tell me what you want while you can reach it." "I want another chance without making you drag every decent answer out of me." Then the waitress refilled Jerome's coffee. Jerome thanked her, and Lena smelled his breath when he spoke. Lena closed her eyes. "You went outside and drank." "A controlled amount. I asked you to come sober." "I did arrive sober." "That is an answer designed by somebody smart enough to know it isn't honest." She took her keys but left the money beneath the cup. "I like talking to you this way. That is what makes this worse. I will not spend another relationship waiting for you to drink enough to become the man you think I want." Jerome watched her cross the parking lot and concentrated on how long she had stayed. Then he looked through the window at his truck. He set his keys beside the register. "Don't give me these back today." The waitress pushed them behind the pie case. "Wasn't planning to." Jerome called Pastor Dean, who collected him in the church van 20 minutes later. Kevin convened the safety hearing at 9 Saturday morning inside Jerome's damaged shed, with the door pulled nearly shut. A clean shop towel covered the workbench. On it rested the stoneware jug and the cough syrup bottle Dean had retrieved from Jerome's truck on his way to the hearing. Jerome sat opposite him on a folding chair. Pastor Dean occupied a second chair with a grocery sack between his boots and the wary expression of a man whose pastoral training had not covered alien employment disputes. Kevin's translation collar rested beneath his mandibles, his natural clicks audible beneath the English projected from the ring. The ship completed Dean's exposure review first. Civilian exposure evaluation complete. Continued discretion recorded. Dean glanced toward the radio. "Do I need to sign anything?" "Not unless you want another hearing," Jerome said. Kevin activated his scanner. "The vessel estimates that you have consumed 22 ounces of the altered batch since Tuesday. 9 ounces were consumed between sunset and 4 this morning. I reorganized the business accounts. You also alphabetized the pesticides by manufacturer and attempted to calculate the theological depreciation of the church van." Dean drew the grocery sack closer. Jerome had spent the night settling 6 years of invoices, repairing 2 pieces of equipment, and composing a letter to Lena that became less suitable for delivery with every revision. Kevin displayed the medical figures. Jerome's heart rhythm was irregular, his hydration poor, and his last complete period of sleep had occurred Wednesday night. "Consultations remain suspended," Kevin said. "You will not operate the truck, vessel, fabrication system, or altered liquor. I am exercising independent biological and vessel safety authority. My drinking is personal conduct. You used it while conducting business." "Lena was not a customer." Dean cleared his throat. "I paid $20. You were a customer. Lena was a private social failure. You concealed the dose, consumed it away from medical supervision, and continued drinking after you returned home," Kevin said. Jerome could identify 3 ambiguities in the wording of Kevin's authority. He reached for the jug while preparing the strongest one. Kevin placed both hands around it first. "You gave me this authority because you expected yourself to disagree with it." The contract did not say that. Jerome had written the rule for exactly this argument. Jerome raised his face toward the shed's crooked roof. "Lord, I recognize intervention when I see it, but I object to the size of the committee." Dean opened the grocery sack, produced a ham sandwich, and handed it to him. "The committee recommends breakfast." The kitchen faucet handle struck the shed door 3 times. "Jerome," Nia called from outside, "my water stopped. It coughed mud, made a noise under the floor, and quit. The manager says he cannot get anybody here before Monday." Jerome stood too quickly. Dehydration and too little sleep narrowed his vision, and he caught the workbench hard enough to make the evidence jump. Jerome opened the door only far enough for him and Dean to step outside. Nia waited in house shoes with the faucet handle still raised. Kevin remained out of sight. "East row," Jerome said. "Nia's service line has opened all the way." A wet crack moved through the soil beneath them. Nia's left heel dropped 4 inches. Dean caught her by the elbow as brown water bubbled around her house shoe. From beneath the damaged shed came a deep wooden groan. The groan traveled east. Nia's trailer settled with a metallic bang, and the propane tank beside it leaned toward the widening crack. Its copper line snapped tight beneath the skirting. A faint hiss followed. The rotten egg stink of leaking propane reached Jerome. "Nobody starts an engine," he shouted. "Nobody touches a light switch. Dean, move folks uphill and keep cigarettes out of their hands." "Including yours?" Dean asked. Jerome bit off half of the ham sandwich and pointed the remainder toward the east row. "Start with everybody else." Behind Jerome, the shed door opened. Kevin emerged sealed inside his gloves, hood, and full-face respirator, still holding the gallon jug. Less than a cup and a half washed across its bottom. With propane in the air and muddy water rising, the protective equipment looked sensible for once. Jerome tried to map the soil pressure, gas flow, trailer weight, and failure angles. Smart Jerome might have held all of it together. Sober Jerome saw mud, leaking gas, and a trailer coming down. He reached toward the jug. Kevin stepped back. His projected English emerged through the respirator. "Safety authority remains active." "Keep it," Jerome said. "I need the parts God issued standard." Calvin Russ came round the row on his riding mower, towing the utility trailer. Jerome made him kill the engine 20 yards away. Together they pushed the trailer to the edge of the wet ground and unloaded concrete blocks, 2 fence posts, and a bumper jack Calvin claimed had supported a tobacco barn during Hurricane Hugo. Doris appeared with 3 neighbors and immediately began moving spectators farther back. Dean loaded the East Row residents into the church van, but left it parked uphill. Nia led him to the park's main shutoff, hidden beneath an overturned bird bath near the old laundry pad. Water carved a brown trench beneath Nia's trailer. One stack of concrete supports tilted, and the floor above it gave a low pop. Kevin set the jug on a concrete block. Jerome thrust the surviving half of the sandwich into Kevin's gloved hand. Jerome laid 2 fence posts across the soft ground and slid along them on his stomach. Years beneath trailers had taught him where weight could be trusted and where dry-looking soil intended murder. He reached the propane tank as it shifted another inch. The service valve was on the low side, inches above the water. Jerome hooked one boot around a fence post and stretched until his shoulder protested. His fingers closed on the valve. He turned until the metal stopped, then stayed in place while Calvin and Doris's neighbors wedged concrete blocks beneath the tank cradle. Kevin, moving carefully on his supported leg, guided them with a scanner held low against his coveralls. The hiss faded. At the laundry pad, metal shrieked. Dean and Nia forced the main valve closed. The brown surge weakened to a stream and then to water, soaking quietly into ruined ground. Jerome crawled back across the fence posts. He emerged muddy, shaken, and no longer able to remember the pressure rating of the propane line. He remembered how to close one. Calvin pointed toward his mower. "Safe to start?" 4 people answered no before Jerome caught his breath. Kevin offered him the surviving half of the ham sandwich instead of the jug. Jerome accepted the ruling. Mrs. Bellamy's voice rose from the church van. "Has anybody seen Muffin?" Jerome looked toward Lot 11. Dean had loaded Mrs. Bellamy before she managed to clip on the pink leash, which now trailed from her hand without anything objectionable attached to it. Kevin carried the jug and the pocketed cough syrup bottle around the rear of the damaged shed, through the screen of pines, and into the husk-halar by its concealed far side hatch. Tank followed at a distance and slipped through before the hatch closed. Inside, Kevin set the jug on a transfer bench and removed its stopper so he could decant the liquor into a secure container. Then he noticed Tank crouched beneath a storage rack, watching a sterilization arm unfold from the ceiling. "You are not assigned to this vessel," Kevin said. Tank launched at the arm. His hindquarters struck the open stoneware jug on the transfer bench. It rolled onto its side, and the clear liquor poured across the deck into a decontamination channel. Tank landed, shook himself, and licked at it before Kevin caught him around the middle. The ship administered an alcohol-binding compound while Tank attempted to bite the applicator. 2 ounces remained trapped behind the jug's inward shoulder. The cough syrup bottle held another ounce. "Canine metabolism converts the Vel compound," the ship reported. "Neurological activity is increasing." Tank stopped fighting. His ears turned toward the hatch. He sniffed once, passed through it, and waited beyond the concealment field for Kevin to follow. Kevin kept the disguise on and led Tank back through the hidden path. Jerome joined them as the dog caught Batch 37's familiar sour corn smell and tracked it to Mr. Haney's loosened skirting. Then he looked back. "That dog has never asked permission to enter anywhere," Jerome said. They pulled the skirting aside. 2 sealed jars marked 37 rested in the mud. A third stood behind them with 3 fingers missing. Mr. Haney appeared at the corner of his trailer. "Those are windmill compensation." "You sent me clear across town to find a replacement rooster," Jerome said. "Feed store ain't stocked wooden ones since Clinton." "That sounds like poor inventory management." Doris folded her arms. "Welder, extension cables, and 2 Saturdays on the repair crew." Mr. Haney looked at Jerome. Jerome lifted 1 muddy jar. "Or I ask Lena what category grain-based cleaning theft falls under." 2 Saturdays, Mr. Haney said. Lena parked 20 minutes later. Her Saturday shift had ended just as Jerome's address was repeated beside the words, "propane leak." She found him muddy, sober, and holding the recovered jars without drinking from one. "You all right?" she asked. "No headache, several regrets." Jerome looked toward Kevin, who waited in full protective gear beside the rear path. "One of them needs handling." He crossed the yard and led Kevin behind the damaged shed, far enough into the pines that Lena and the remaining neighbors could not hear them. Waiting was not going to improve it. "I used what wasn't mine because I wanted it," he told Kevin. "I should have asked." Kevin considered him. "Apology accepted. Unsupervised access remains prohibited." "Figured it might." Dean looked toward Kevin. "What I saw stays in Shady Acres." Lena waited until Jerome returned. She pointed at the muddy jar in his hand. "Is that what you drank at the diner?" "No, this is ordinary illegal liquor." Jerome set the jar on the consultation table instead of opening it. "Kevin has the 3 surviving ounces of the smart batch. He took control after I'd consumed 22 since Tuesday." Lena's expression changed. 22? The last 9 were spread across an extended accounting emergency. "You hid a dose in your truck and drank it after I asked you to come sober." "Yes." "No explanation?" Jerome looked at the churned mud beneath his boots. Smart Jerome might have built a better excuse. Muddy Jerome did not have one. "I cheated," he said. "You asked for me sober. I gave you that until the conversation got difficult. then changed myself in the parking lot and came back." Lena said nothing for a moment. Behind her, Doris assigned Mr. Haney a shovel and rejected his first 2 medical objections. "Did you want another drink when the line broke?" Lena asked. "More than I wanted breakfast." "Why didn't you take it?" "Kevin stopped me first." Jerome glanced toward the rear path. "Then I looked at my hands. Smart liquor might have let me calculate every pressure and angle under that trailer, but it wouldn't make my hand steady enough to close the valve. I already knew how to do the part that mattered." Lena studied him with the same patient attention she used when callers gave addresses in the wrong order. Jerome kept quiet. "That does not repair yesterday or the years before it," she said. "No, ma'am." Lena looked toward the jars in the collapsed ground. "Coffee Wednesday. No medicine bottles. It is coffee, not a restored relationship or an advance pardon." Before following Kevin toward the ship, Jerome took the pesticide marker from the consultation table and added 2 lines beneath the price: "Pest, pipes, and motors only. No taxes, theology, or relationship advice." Kevin led Jerome through the concealed path and combined the 3 surviving ounces in a sealed vessel container aboard the Hiss Kalar. Access required his authorization and a recorded emergency declaration from Jerome. Mrs. Bellamy reclaimed Muffin and clipped the pink leash to his collar. The dog studied the spring snap, nosed its thumb trigger beneath the lower lip of the church van's metal step, and took the leash just above the clip in his teeth. He backed away. The step held the trigger down, the spring bolt retracted, and Muffin twisted his neck until the collar ring slipped through the open gap. Muffin trotted away with the leash hanging from the van. Mrs. Bellamy followed him around Lot 11, calling his name with decreasing affection. Once she was out of hearing, Jerome touched his communicator. "How long?" Kevin answered from aboard the ship. "Approximately 6 hours." Jerome raised his face toward heaven. "Lord, I understand the lesson. The additional commentary feels excessive. All right, this is Jerome with a quick message to you. If you enjoy this particular professional disaster, hit the like button and subscribe to A.H. Mayweather's channel. Apparently that helps the little machine recommend us to folks who might enjoy questionable moonshine, alien paperwork, and professionally managed chaos. The next catastrophe ought to be on the screen in front of you. If it ain't, check the Interstellar Pest Control playlist. If you're looking for other books or audiobooks by A.H. Mayweather, the website's in the description. Thanks for listening. And remember, if it scratches, bites, glows, or violates the known laws of physics, call somebody qualified. If they're unavailable, call Pritchard Pest Control.